Thomas and Timothy. The engines sat in the sheds one morning as their crews walked around them, preparing for them for the day's work. To pass the time, Gordon, as usual, was boasting about himself to the others.
You know, my brothers and I are all very powerful express engines, always ready to fly down the line with our passengers.
The other engines rolled their eyes, but Thomas was intrigued.
Do you have many brothers, Gordon?
Oh yes, and many cousins too. They're all big and important like me.
I had brothers too.
Oh really? You always seemed one of a kind to me, always so annoying.
Edward shushed the big engine.
Go on, Thomas.
Well, I had 9 to be exact, but they're all gone now.
What happened to them?
Retired or put out of service. I'm afraid that most of them have been scrapped by now.
Oh my, we are sorry, Thomas. We didn't know.
We all had our brothers sent for scrap. It's a horrifying thing to think about, but none of us were ever very close to our brothers. But it seems you were, Thomas.
The engines were sad to see that Thomas was becoming very emotional. Even Gordon. They all felt sorry for Thomas.
Well, I loved my brothers, especially Timothy.
Timothy?
He was my oldest brother and my best friend. It would take a while to explain.
Tell us, Thomas. It'll make you feel better.
Yes, we've got plenty of time until our first trains.
And so, Thomas began his tale.
My brothers and I were built many years ago near the south coast of England. Timothy was the first built and I was in the middle. The 10 of us were all very close, working in and around the marshalling yards and docks. Timothy, being the oldest, looked after all of us and was something of a father figure, especially to me, being one of the youngest.
That's wonderful, Thomas.
The other engines agreed.
I was usually the big engine though.
Yes, Timothy was a wonderful brother. One day, one of the bigger engines was making fun of me after I foolishly derailed the truck without waiting for the points to be changed. Furious and I bothered to buffer with the big engine, telling him how awful he was to making fun of the smaller engines.
Without engines like Thomas, you might not ever have coal for your tender and water for your tanks.
Sounds like we could have used them around here.
He and I spent many nights talking about, well, everything, from the coaches to the stars in the sky. Timothy always took time to talk to me. No question was ever too stupid, and he always had a word of advice for me.
You remind me a lot of myself when I was your age, always ready for anything. But never be afraid to be yourself, Thomas, and always take opportunities when they're present to you.
One day, me and my crew and I were informed that I had been bought by a faraway railway. It turned out later that this had been from Sir Topham Hatt. I didn't want to leave England, but Timothy reassured me and said,
You're growing up to be a fine little tank engine, Thomas. It's time for you to go off on your own and show them what us E2 tank engines can do.
Thomas paused. He found it hard to speak, thinking about how bittersweet his departure was. The engines were respectfully silent as Thomas gathered his strength to continue again.
I arrived to the island of Sodor. My driver and fireman found that they really liked the people here and both were soon married. I began to enjoy my new home too, but always felt guilty for leaving Timothy, even though I knew it was for the best. But I never heard from Timothy again. No matter how many letters my driver sent, he never got a reply.
Maybe he was too busy?
I wish that were true. One day we did get a letter, but it wasn't from Timothy. It was from one of my other brothers.
What did it say?
It said that Timothy had plunged off of a new viaduct they were constructing near the harbor. His brakes had failed and he couldn't stop at the station. Thankfully, there hadn't been any passengers on the train and his driver and fireman had jumped clear. But Timothy didn't make it. I was here on Sodor. Oh, how I wish I could have spoken to him one last time.
The engines didn't know what to say. They had no idea that Thomas had been suffering for so many years with the knowledge of his brother's demise. But it was apparent that Gordon's boasting about his brothers, some of whom were still healthy and running well, had been in poor taste. Later afternoon, Gordon approached Thomas, who was sitting at the station banging a doorbell.
I hope you will forgive me for boasting about my brothers this morning. I didn't know it was such a sensitive area for you.
That's okay, Gordon. Timothy was taken from me so suddenly, and for many years I didn't know what to do. But Timothy was right about one thing.
What's that?
He was right when he said that I should take opportunities when they were presented to me. Though I left them in England, I will never regret coming here and meeting all of you.
And we're glad to have you here too. No matter what, we will always look out for you.
Thomas simply beamed. Though he didn't have his big brother anymore, he had a lot of peace in knowing that he had a family here on Sodor too.